Hi, I'm Peter Chan, National Weather Service Program Lead of the Alaska Weather Show, and I have a very important change notice to share with you. If you haven't already heard the last TV broadcast of Alaska weather, at least in the traditional sense, over the airwaves, will be on Friday, June 30th. Starting on July 1st, the National Weather Service will provide a modified web-based version of the program on a new YouTube channel. We will be moving on YouTube from the Alaska Public Media site to @NWS Alaska, so you can go ahead and subscribe to this channel ahead of time. A public comment period remains open through July 30th, so please send your comments and concerns to nws.service-changecomments@noaa.gov. If you have any additional questions, you may reach carrie.haisley@noaa.gov and donald.moore@noaa.gov. We thank you for your patience and understanding.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's show. First, we'll have the fire weather danger for grass, and it's improved up here over the Yukon Valley, upper Yukon Valley there. We had an extreme forecast for today, a small area there for forecast for tomorrow. High fire danger with just a small area of very high fire danger off to the southwest and again up to the northeast there. Eastern interior here, down to the Alaska Range, or just north of the Alaska Range in the low category. North Slope, Brooks Range low, Western Seward Peninsula low, and much of the southwest interior areas here. And of course, southern Alaska and into the Panhandle. Start to get some medium areas there down over toward the southern southeast coast, east of Prince of Wales Island. And then quite an area of very high fire danger now, kind of expanded from today to forecast for tomorrow for the Copper River Basin there. Also very high for grass, again, north of the Alaska Range here into the Tanana Valley and back to the northwest there, with medium fire dangers, again, for grass over the Yukon Delta and up into the lower and mid Yukon River Valley areas, actually almost up into the Kobuk Valley as well. Moving on to spruce, again, Yukon Flats, very high fire danger there, and over the Tanana Valley and Deltana Flats area there, north of the Alaska Range. That's where the highest fire danger is for spruce in the state there, and some high to maybe very high in the Copper River Basin, again more expanded than it was today, and areas of medium extending westward there with low over the western part of the state and south central Alaska, Susitna, Manaska Valley also low, as well as Kodiak Island, and all the Panhandle in the low category. And for satellite imagery, you can see kind of a system winding up here, a wave developing on this front, actually a trough as it moves into the southeast coast today. That brought about over half an inch of rain to Petersburg during the day today, and some of that moisture up to the North Gulf Coast, and showers in areas, light showers across the northern Kenai Peninsula there in the northern Cook Inlet during the day today, with clouds pushing up into the Tanana Valley. Some more clearing, though, farther to the north toward the eastern Brooks Range Arctic Village area. And then low pressure here just east of the Pribilof Islands, actually very close to St. Paul there. And that pushing a front and moisture moving northward there into Kodiak Island and Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula areas. Some light rain with that. And then more moisture coming into the eastern Aleutians. And you can see the next band of clouds trying to push into the Bering Sea, the northwest Bering Sea, coming out of the Russian Far East, most of it kind of heading southward there, and so kind of splitting up there as it hits this northerly flow, wrapping around this low over the southeast Bering Sea. Not much going on around central western Aleutians conditions. Just a lot of clouds with a few breaks out there, and dry conditions, maybe some fog, as you can see, up into the Bering Sea areas of low clouds and fog away from either low here to the southeast or up there to the northwest. And that extends right up into the Bering Strait. Had some showers lingering today over the north slope. Some areas seen a fair amount of precipitation over the last 12 to 24 hours up there. Umiat Airfield had over an inch of rain in the last 24 hours there, and so that's brought high river levels to the Colville River. No serious flooding though, just higher water levels. And some scattered thunderstorms here over the interior again this afternoon, and some scattered showers south central Alaska area. This front bringing areas of rain and showers into the Alaska Peninsula, spreading into western and southwest Kodiak Island with some light rain up into northern Bristol Bay, mostly staying south of the Kuskokwim Valley for the most part, and scattered showers in the Yukon Delta. And for the panhandlers, that trough that brought the rain over the to the area there today, with showers up to the Cape St. Elias area or so, but generally pretty dry in Prince William Sound. For tonight, continues to dry out. Still an isolated shower or two lingering around the north slope, maybe the Arctic coast, but much drier than it has been, and that'll extend down into the interior as well. Look for low clouds and fog anywhere over the Arctic Ocean, mostly along and off the Arctic coast for the lowest conditions, but that'll extend down through the Bering Strait with the light winds and into the Bering Sea. Here, this low not moving a whole lot, kind of spinning another trough and some more moisture in the form of light rain, fog, and drizzle into the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And this front slowly pushing eastward, but not moving too fast at all, kind of lying parallel to that south-southeasterly wind flow right through here. So it keeps Kodiak Island cloudy and occasionally wet with maybe some fog and drizzle going there for lower flying conditions, some moisture in the form of light rain or showers up into western Cook Inlet and along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Otherwise, it's sit in the valley, mostly dry, maybe a few scattered showers. Same thing for the Matanuska Valley, as well as the Copper River Basin and the North Gulf Coast. And this trough keeps it damp and unsettled over the central and northern southeast coast. But down south, the closer you get to that high center near the Queen Charlotte Islands, better chance you'll have drier weather with maybe some clearing. Otherwise, out to the west, that system weakening as it drops south and southeastward here out of the Russian Far East, maybe spreading some light rain or showers into the, trying to get into the Aleutians, but mostly staying to the north of the area. And then we'll see tomorrow that thing continues to kick off to the southeast there, and that will probably spread some rain, fog, and drizzle into Adak and Atka. A little bit of a pickup in the winds there, but nothing too serious. This low edging eastward slowly toward western Bristol Bay, and so that's going to keep a lot of clouds and light precipitation activity tomorrow here for the Alaska Peninsula, and mostly showers for the eastern Aleutians there, and then back into the rain with that next trough. Then this front kind of reorients itself to something like this with occasional rain for Kodiak Island or showers, definitely cloudy skies continuing. Light rain possibly spreading up along the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula, maybe into western Prince William Sound, but amounts will be pretty light with this. And then best chance of showers and thunderstorms will be over the west central interior right through here, all the way up to the Brooks Range here along that trough. And actually the Brooks Range could see some showers or thunderstorms covering much of the area up there tomorrow afternoon, as that moisture that comes westward kind of slips up to the northwest there and then cuts off near just north of the Eagle area, or just south of Eagle. So that's going to make for a partly sunny day for the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country down to about the Copper River Basin, and much drier for the Panhandle. Could be some low clouds and fog along the coast, some lingering scattered shower conditions over the southern areas, but dry with partly sunny skies up to the north. And moving on to the Wednesday forecast, another trough, weak low pressure, but another trough brings more rain into the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast. Mostly cloudy, showers, south central Alaska. Not much change in the pattern at all. More light rain here for the Bristol Bay area and Alaska Peninsula, and showers and thunderstorms over the interior, and nothing serious going on out over the Bering Sea or up to the north here along the Arctic coast and the North Slope. Lows tonight in the upper 40s or mid 40s to lower to mid-50s. Highs tomorrow in the 60s, upper 60s, Copper River Basin, Kuskokwim Valley. Otherwise, upper 50s to lower 60s, 55 to 60 for south central Alaska, and 60, 65 for the Panhandle. Lows tonight, lows Wednesday morning in the 40s, mid-50s for the Panhandle, followed by highs about the same, 60s, upper 60s, Copper River Basin, Kuskokwim Valley, upper 50s to lower 60s here for south central Alaska, maybe mid-60s to Sitna Valley, a tad warmer in the Panhandle, upper 50s along the coast, otherwise 60 to 70 inland areas. Up to the north, lows 30s for the Arctic coast, otherwise 40s and 50s elsewhere, followed by highs 70 to 75 central eastern interior between the Brooks Range and the Alaska Mountains there. And for the lows the following morning in the lower to mid-50s, cooler on the Arctic coast, followed by highs coming back up into the lower 80s for the Yukon Flats over toward Eagle, 77 for Fairbanks. Southwest coast tonight, lows in the 40s, lower 40s for the Aleutians, followed by highs in the upper 40s and lows in the lower 40s, highs 45 to 50.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Tuesday morning's aviation graphic looks something like this. IFR again off the Arctic coast, some marginal VFR right along the coastline, but for the north slope, right on down into the interior, good VFR, and then pick up some marginal VFR here along the Alaska Range down into south central Alaska with some IFR, southern Kenai Peninsula into Prince William Sound, mainly western Prince William Sound, and the North Gulf Coast. Big area of IFR out here over the Bering Sea, covering most of the Aleutians. And for the Panhandle, nothing but IFR there to start the day out over to about Yakutat. Then that burns off. That's due to low clouds and fog burning off in the afternoon to VFR conditions, lingering marginal VFR out here along the coast. IFR, western Prince William Sound, and VFR interior Alaska improving here, even south central Alaska, the Copper River Basin, southwest interior becoming all VFR. And no change for the Arctic coast and North Slope. And for the Bering Sea, solid VFR, at least areas of here from the Bering Strait all the way down across the central and western Aleutians, Fox Islands, Alaska Peninsula up into Bristol Bay, marginal. And then for the day Wednesday morning, we've got IFR very close to the Arctic coast, probably coming on shore in some areas, but not others. Most of the North Slope VFR, across the Brooks Range VFR, and again the interior into the Copper River Basin staying pretty good. Building IFR here over the Gulf of Alaska, pushing in to the central and south coast of the Panhandle, otherwise marginal VFR for the remainder of the southeast coast. And out over the Bering Sea, a lot of IFR once again here. Possible anywhere over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians as well, and through the Bering Strait into the Chukchi Sea. And then for the afternoon, mostly IFR over the central and eastern Bering Sea now, but pulling northward there. So the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, looking at just marginal VFR flying conditions for Wednesday afternoon. Interior here, nothing but VFR, maybe some marginal VFR on the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Into Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula, another round of moisture coming up in southeasterly flow, so IFR along the North Gulf Coast and down along the central and southern coast of the Panhandle with marginal VFR over the inside waters. Now some marginal VFR a little bit farther inland there over the Arctic coast and North Slope. Passes, Anatuvik and Anigan looking really good for the Brooks Range tomorrow. And Wednesday as well. Next couple of days look good for Brooks Range with VFR flying through both passes. Lake Clark and Merrill, mostly marginal VFR at times, gradual improvement through the afternoon hours. So optimistically going to go VFR for Rainy Pass on either approach. And for Windy, same forecast, definitely VFR for Windy Pass tomorrow, south and north entrances as well. Isabel, VFR, and Mentasta looking good. VFR flying for the eastern Alaska Range. And for the Tanita Pass into the Matanuska Valley, VFR. Portage Pass, a little lower there, especially on the eastern entrance. IFR trending toward marginal VFR in the afternoon or throughout the day, maybe by midday. And for Chilkoot White, VFR for one more day. And for the freezing levels, cool upper level low right about here over the southeast Bering Sea. So 4,000 feet roughly from Kodiak Island over the southeast Bering, and about 6,000 feet here over the west coast and southern Alaska, sloping up to about 8,000 over toward the eastern border and running anywhere from 8 to 10,000 feet over the panhandle. And for icing, the next graphic here, shaded area showing the highest potential for some isolated moderate rime icing extending from the Arctic coast. And again, that's possible anywhere here over the western interior, maybe into south central Alaska down to Kodiak Island, and then out over the eastern Bering Sea, icing free to the west, panhandle eastern interior, all icing free, no threat there. And for the jet stream, 33,000 foot wind flow chart showing southeasterly flow, turning south at about 85 knots and diminishing as it makes landfall here along the North Gulf Coast. Stronger jet out to the west there, out of the northwest 90 to 100 knots, 3,000 or 9,000 feet, northwest 45 to 55 knots there over the western central Aleutians, southeast 45 along the right across Cape Newinum there, southwest coast, 40 knots in across the Kenai Peninsula, light for the panhandle and up to the north, 3,000 feet. Easterlies or east-southeasterlies, 25 to 30 knots across the southwest interior, northwest 50 for the Aleutians. And for the turbulence, isolated moderate chop for the Aleutians, southwest interior, and along the north.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
The Space Weather Prediction Center has had a long-standing relationship with the power industry, so they've been aware that solar storms, the geomagnetic storm piece of that, can affect the operation of their systems and induce extra currents and loads on those systems that can either trip those systems offline or in the worst of cases, cause damage. That relationship goes back for several decades. In fact, a big incident in 1989 where part of Quebec was tripped offline that affected something like 6 million customers for about 9 hours. I think that really raised the awareness in the power industries.
When we get the alert, we watch the grid and start looking for issues. Are we seeing a decline in voltage? Are we seeing equipment failures? And we readjust the system to try to mitigate those problems, try to keep the lights on and keep it from going out.
Averaging about 500, 550 kilometers per second.
If we didn't have this early warning, we wouldn't see it until our sensor saw it. Getting more information quicker and faster before the storm hits, not during the storm, is a big improvement.
In the long term, I think what we need and what we're moving toward, the U.S. as a whole, is better modeling, fully understanding this phenomenon, understanding how it would impact specific systems.
Rather than actually experiencing a storm, we can simulate storms in our software and see what the impact is. We try to get ahead of it. We always plan that if there's an outage, how can we keep the lights on? What's the best process to prevent it?
In the end, 5-10 years from now, there's going to be a whole mix of operational procedures driven by what we do on prediction and warning. And then there also will probably be some level of hardware controls to ensure the reliability of the grid.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
There's different types of impacts on communication systems. And the HF we call the high frequency, which is that band of communications 3 to 30 megahertz. But it's a very important band of radio communication because it's used widespread. It's used, for example, by the airlines.
HF radio is most commonly used for position reporting when you're going across the ocean airspace, which is devoid of radar, and ATC can't see you, so it's up to you to report your position and your altitude and your speed.
HF works great most of the time, except during a big flare. And during a big flare, that HF communication capability could be gone within a minute or two. So as soon as we see something happening in there and we see a flare, it's one of the first things we do is alert the aviation community, hey, big flare, HF's going to be impacted.
Once we know that there's an event going on, then the aviation industry and the airlines can react to that. They can alter their routes over the poles. They can lower the altitudes that they're flying at, or maybe decide not to fly at all in the interest of the passenger safety.
So that's just one example of how HF is used, but the emergency response community will use it a lot too. It's one of their primary backups.
When you've lost connectivity between certain government agencies, it gives you that long-range coverage to talk from out of state to federal governments or from the FEMA locations to the state emergency operations centers.
So if you've got a big hurricane impact in the coastline, whatever big city, we've got the cell towers down and whatnot. We've got emergency communication folks in there. Those folks are very familiar with space weather and how it impacts their systems.
Here in recent years, it was used during Katrina when we had a lot of communications outages down there. It was also used during Hurricane Ike. There was an outage of the telephone circuits with the Texas State Emergency Office, so it was used in both of those situations.
So when we talk about backup, especially for the airlines, typically they'll have SATCOM, so it'll be satellite communication.
The satellite technology that emergency responders use could be GPSs, could be satellite phones, satellite data terminals.
Space weather events can impact SATCOMs. The impact can range from a nuisance to loss of a spacecraft. So we will give them the heads up. If we have space weather events, flares, whatnot, they need to know what's impacting their systems. Situational awareness is key. Time is of essence to these folks. Again, it's life and death.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Marine forecast for the south coast tomorrow. South winds 10 to 15 knots. Central coast south to southeast at 10 and southeast at 10 for the north coast. Seas running 5 to 6 feet. And for the inside waters, light variable winds and seas 2 feet or less. Outlook for Wednesday. Clarence Strait, southeast breeze at 10 knots. Same thing for Stevens Passage. Sea staying down around 2 feet or so. And for Lynn Canal, south winds 15 knots with 3-foot seas. And for the south coast, south winds at 15, south to southeast at 20 for the central coast, and east-southeast at 20 for the north coast. For Prince William Sound, east winds 15 knots for the day on Tuesday. East-southeast 15 for the eastern North Gulf Coast. East at 20 here for the west side. Southeast 20 for the Barren Islands. Kamishak Bay, small craft advisories. East winds 25 knots, seas 7 feet. And for Cook Inlet, northeasterlies at 15. And then for Wednesday, kind of a variable wind pattern here for Cook Inlet, 10 to 15 knots, 3 to 4 foot seas. Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, easterly winds at 20 knots for the North Gulf Coast. Variable winds at 10 knots. Prince William Sound, east winds at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. And for Kodiak Island for Tuesday, east and southeast winds 15 knots, seas running 4 to 6 feet. And for the Alaska Peninsula, south to south and southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, seas at about 3 to 6 feet there. And for Bristol Bay, southeast at 20 with 3-foot seas. And for Wednesday, for the Alaska Peninsula, southwest 15 knots in the forecast with 4 to 5 foot seas. Bristol Bay looking at easterly winds at about 15 knots there. And south to northeast winds here for Kodiak Island at about 15 knots with 4 to 5 foot seas. Small craft advisories here for all of the Aleutians, specifically for the eastern Aleutians. West winds 25 knots tomorrow, 7 to 8 foot seas. West-southwest 25 to 30 knots for Adak and Atka, and Hamchitka to Shemya. West winds 30 knots, seas 7 feet. And then for Wednesday, lighter winds with westerlies 15 to 25 knots for the western Aleutians, seas at about 5 to 7 feet. Northwest 15 with 4 to 5 foot seas for Adak and Atka. Eastern Aleutians, northwest wind 20 knots with seas 5 to 6 feet. And for the southwest coast here, northeast at 15 for the Yukon Delta coast, Kuskokwim Delta coast, east at 20 knots, north 20 for the Pribilof Islands, and northeast at 15 for St. Matthew Island. St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound both looking at an easterly wind at 15 for the day on Tuesday. Then for Wednesday, for St. Lawrence Island, northeast wind 15 knots. Same thing for the Yukon Delta coast. Norton Sound, northeast at about 10 with seas around roughly at 2 feet. St. Matthew Island, northern Bering Sea, winds north at 15 knots with 4 foot seas, turning northwest at 15 for the Pribilofs. And here for the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, winds east at 15. Up to the north, eastern Boulevard Sea coast, looking at east winds at 10 knots. Then southwest 10 for the central coast, southwest 15 there for the west side, the Chukchi Sea south to southeast at 10 to 15 knots. And then for Wednesday, Chukchi Sea northwest 15 to 20 knots, and north to northeast at 20 knots for the western Arctic coast. Central coast east at about 15 knots, and then easterlies at 20 knots there for the east side. And taking a look at tonight's weather again, got this trough kind of stalled out over the central and northern panhandle for continuous light rain, fog, drizzle there, drier down to the south, scattering out showers along the North Gulf Coast and over the Cop River Basin. Moisture kind of on the increase here along the Yukon River and the eastern interior. Some moisture starts to slide westward into the interior, and rain, fog, light rain and fog, Kodiak Island with this next front up into Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Delta, and over the Alaska Peninsula. Tomorrow that low doesn't move much, and the front kind of reorients itself something like this, keeping it wet for Kodiak Island and over the southwest part of the state. Scattered thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon. Not too bad for the panhandle. And then for Wednesday, more rain for the southeast coast, about the same in the interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.